Hi everyone, this is Rohit from License Mastery, and today I'm excited to have Vivek Sodera, who's the founder of Superhuman. Superhuman is the fastest email client in the world and was rebuilt the inbox from the ground up to make you brilliant at what you do. And prior to Superhuman, Vivek was the founder of LiveAmp, which went public in 2018. Vivek has done his bachelor's from University of Berkeley. Welcome to the show, Vivek.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So, how did you get your start in startups, and what got you really interested to be in this world of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so in college, I was a double major in chemical and nuclear engineering at UC Berkeley. A friend of mine accidentally emailed me. He meant to email another friend, and he emailed this entrepreneurship speaker series. And so I'd asked him, I was like, what is this? And I attended the class because I was very intrigued, and that I caught the bug at that point. I realized, you know what am I doing? It's my senior year of college. I'm going down the path of being a nuclear engineer, doing a PhD. But this is really interesting. This lecture series where I caught this bug, and so I delayed graduating by a year, and I took every single entrepreneurship class at UC Berkeley. I audited the Haas Business School classes as well. And when I came out of college, I was looking for an opportunity to be at an early stage startup. And so I got connected to this guy, Orrin Hoffman, who was starting a company. And, I really didn't care too much about what the company did. The company was called Rapleaf, which was building a reputation platform. For me, it was really wanting to learn as much as I could from the feet of a master about all things startups, all things entrepreneurship. And so I was very fortunate to join as one of the founders of that company. That company has gone through ups and downs and went through various pivots. And its final form became LiveRamp, which which was an ad tech company that went public. And yeah, I'm very lucky to be part of that journey. So that's how I got my start in the startup world.
Very interesting because you've been a solid serial entrepreneur. You've also before Superhuman, you've also been part of ASC. What were some of your learnings with ASC, and how do you deal with startups where you're trying to get to the right product market fit?
Yeah. So I've done 3 companies now. Superhuman's my 3rd company. LiveRamp was my first. With LiveRamp, we didn't focus on getting a product market fit. We were focused on getting customers, and we ended up building a product and had type of data that resonated with our customer base. And so we just started to invest in growth and started to invest in growing the business. With my second company, Airseed, I assumed we would get to product market fit. Now, this is a company that was a developer platform, and I was at the helm as CEO of this company. So I assumed we would get to product market fit. Based on my experience, it would happen. And that was a false assumption, because I learned the hard way that I need to laser focus on product market fit. But by that point, it was too late. I was pretty burned out. I had it was about 2.5, almost 3 years into the company, had raised a small amount of venture capital, about 1.2 million, and was pretty much exhausting all of that. And so that learning, it was incredibly painful, but it definitely influenced our approach in Superhuman, definitely influenced my push for us to get to product market fit at Superhuman. And so, yeah, the Airseed journey was one that was, experienced failure in that respect. But as they say, failure is a rite of passage for entrepreneurship. And so I learned an immense amount about myself through that experience. Looking at yourself in the mirror and realizing, you're not actually meant to be a CEO. Like, that was one of the things that I learned about myself. It was an exercise of self-awareness. And through tears, just, realizing these things about what am I good at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And when we started Superhuman, my co-founder Rahul was like, I'm going to be the CEO of this company. And I was like, you should be the CEO. I never want to be CEO ever again. And he was like, I'm curious why. And I was like, I found that the best CEOs, especially for technology companies, are ones who have a technical background. I didn't have a technical background. I wish I did. This was one of the things I would have done differently if I could go back in time. Um, and they are very opinionated about product, and they like to exert control, especially around the product experience. And for me, I didn't value control as much. I valued influence. And so that was definitely a learning, and definitely something that was an incredible failure in that experience, was such an incredible teacher for me.
I think this resonated so well with me because I tried to build a software company and a D2C brand, but I did not have a product background or a technical background, and this is something which I could also, if I could go back, and I would change for myself. But 2020 was a difficult year for a lot of companies, a lot of founders. And what message would you give to founders who would want to sustain morale in such hard times?
What time period?
During the COVID period, there are a lot of companies which folded down. So, any tips for founders who would want to get through such hard times?
Yeah, I think the thing that I very much recommend is identify any win, no matter how small it is. That will help boost the morale internally within yourself and within your company, is if you identify this win and that win, and get into the habit of doing that. We implemented a practice at Superhuman years before the pandemic. We call this Friday Wins, and every Friday we celebrate our wins for the week. And so, as a small team, everyone would go up, and we would, when we were in an office together, we would make cocktails, we would socialize for about 5-10 minutes, and then folks would present their win for the week. And if you were on the engineering side, it might be, I shipped this feature, I fixed these bugs. If you're on the growth side, it might be, I onboarded these 30, 40 customers. Here's the feedback that we got. If you're on customer support, it might be, here's the screenshots of all the love that we got from customers this week. And so during hard times, whether it's during a pandemic or just independent of a pandemic, your company is just going through a hard time, I think identifying wins and highlighting that and making that part of the culture will help boost the morale and help keep things going for the organization and for the individuals within the company.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to go about it. And I want to go back to Superhuman. You created a engine to define product market fit. Do you think metrics like NPS are the right way to define product market fit? But before that, what was the engine that you developed to define the product market fit?
Yeah, so it was about a year and a half, almost 2 years in, we were starting to get the product in front of some early customers. And I distinctly remember conversations with my co-founder, Rahul, and my other co-founder, Conrad, who's our CTO. And it was like, how do we know that we're at product market fit? And I had this chip on my shoulder. I had this scar tissue from not getting to product market fit with my prior company, Airseed. And that, like I said, that definitely influenced my, I guess, neuroticism about like, oh, we have to get to product market fit. And so this is the genius of Rahul, my co-founder and CEO. He was thinking about reverse engineering a framework, and all the content that was out there was content that was like essentially lagging indicators. Like, when you got to product market fit when investors are beating down your door, and journalists want to write a story from you, or customers are pulling the product out of your hands faster than you can actually deliver it to them. But that was too late. It's like, how do we even get there? How do we get to that point? We needed some leading indicators. And so Rahul, he came back one day, and he was He was like, I stumbled upon this unique insight from this gentleman by the name of Sean Ellis. And Sean was an early growth marketer. I think he may even coin the term growth marketer. He was early at Dropbox, Eventbrite. He had consulted with hundreds of startups. And so in his professional experience, he started measuring that point where these companies get to product market fit. And in particular, he came up with a line of questioning that was orthogonal to NPS. The line of questioning was, how disappointed would you feel if this product went away? And the responses, the options are either very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. And he found by asking this particular question, measuring the results, that across all of these companies, he saw there was a particular inflection point, this pattern around 40% of your users give you the response very disappointed to that question. And so Rahul came back, and I remember we were in our office in the conference room. And prior to that point, we were banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out, like, how do we make this work? How do we know that we've gotten to product market fit? We were surveying our early users and customers, the folks that we had just given this product to. So we introduced this line of questioning. And in addition to that, we introduced other lines of questioning. What's missing from the product today? What do they love about the product? How would they describe Superhuman to someone that, how would they describe someone who would love the product? And so we were measuring these responses, and it just started to come together. And it was a lot of iteration and a lot of tweaking. But from there, we developed this product market fit framework that allowed us to segment these early customers, to identify the power users, the high expectation customers. We analyzed their feedback. We built this roadmap that was 50% of what folks love about the product and 50% of what was missing. And then we just kept asking those questions every time we onboarded a new customer. It was rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And when we started out, I remember our very disappointed score was very far away from that 40%. It was around 22% or so. And then we did some segmentation of our customer base, of the early power users, identify the high expectation customers, and that 22% jumped to 32%. And so we listened to the folks who were fitting this particular persona that had given the response somewhat disappointed. So they weren't very disappointed, they were somewhat disappointed. And we looked at those folks and worked on features and aspect and experiences that were missing today with the product, or missing at that point of the product. For example, the overwhelming response for these early users was having an iOS app. We didn't have an iOS app. Our expectation was we were going to build our iOS app in series instead of in parallel with our desktop web experience. And so we made that a priority. And it was that feedback that led us to double down on not just the speed experience, which is what resonated with the early customers, these high expectation customers, but also what was missing for them. And so that 22%, which became 32%, passed the 40%, and then became 50%. And so interestingly, we did see a lot of magic happen at the 40% threshold. And we saw a flurry of people sign up. We saw a lot of inbound come in from investors, from journalists, et cetera. So that's when we really knew there was something here. And from there, we synthesized the content, and we open sourced it through first round review. And to this day, we still get a lot of love from the community, from other founders, from product managers, from investors. I would say 8 out of 10 product managers have read the Superhuman Guide to Product Market Fit. Pretty much every single investor, every single founder we've come across have mentioned that as well. So, this is something that we were fortunate enough to unlock, demystify this process, and getting to product market fit especially speaking for someone who didn't get there with my prior company, ends up being the death knell for 90+% of startups. So if we can demystify this framework and give folks a playbook, a recipe, I think that's just a significant net positive to the world, where you have all these entrepreneurs who are that much closer to adding value to the world, adding value to society. And we're just fortunate enough that we were able to open source that content for folks.
Yeah, Vivek, this was like a short masterclass on how to do product market fit, and I really love how you reverse engineer the whole thing. But you also had a very different launch strategy, and what was so different, and how did you come up with this launch strategy to get new users?
Yeah, so technically we still haven't launched. So, uh, when we started the company, we expected to build a self-serve premium email experience. And when we got this in the hands of the early customers, like the first 50 or 100 or so, we looked at our metrics and we saw that retention rates were not as high as we expected. Churn was much higher than we expected. We measured NPS. Our NPS score at the time, I think, was like in the 30s or low 40s. We aspired to be at Apple levels, Apple having an NPS score of this in the 70s and 80s. And so, we were scratching our heads and we're like, what's going on here? Why aren't people really retained on the product? Why is our NPS score this low compared to our standards? And so we talked to a lot of our customers. We captured a lot of data, qualitative and quantitative data through surveying, through conversations. We looked at the metrics and we stumbled upon two fundamental truths about our business. The first was that we really had to rewire how people did email. People had developed years, if not decades, of bad habits with email. You never really learn how to do email. You don't take a course.
Yeah.
And so it's like someone who's never learned how to properly work out or have proper nutrition, and they've just had an unhealthy lifestyle all their life. It's in their best interest to go work with a personal trainer to help them develop good habits, at least the first few times around. And then the second was that we had built all these bells and whistles under the hood, and we were building the anti-Gmail, where Gmail is cluttered, has buttons, disjointed experience all over the place, which contributes to people's anxiety and people just frustrated when they look at their inbox. And it also contributes to the performance of the Gmail experience. It's just very clunky. It's very slow. And in contrast, we built something that was minimal, powerful under the hood. We built a command line interface, leveraging keyboard shortcuts. And so a lot of the early customers were missing out on a lot of the bells and whistles that we had built. It's another analogy I have. It's like someone who has their driver's license and they see a Tesla down the street and they're like, I know how to drive that car. I have a driver's license. They get in for the first time. And I know for me, when I first drove a Tesla, I had no idea how to do basic things on a Tesla. It wasn't intuitive. It wasn't obvious. I had to watch a YouTube video for 30 minutes while sitting in the driver's seat of a Tesla and figure out, how do I do this? Okay, here's how to do the turn signal. Here's how to do that. And so in order to be successful in using a product like Tesla, you need someone to actually show you how to do these things. And so it was those two fundamental truths about rewiring people's brains and how they did email, combined with showing folks these bells and whistles, that led to this conclusion that we actually need to hold their hand, at least for the early set of customers. And we'll figure it out later on what we're going to do and how to scale this. But we onboarded myself and Rahul, we paired on this. We onboarded the first 40, 50 customers in person. And we would go to their offices or they would come to ours, and we spend a good hour with them, and we would show them Superhuman, and we would go through their existing workflows and we migrate them over, and we kind of slap them on the wrist when they have like certain bad habits while we're watching them. And then we would get them set up for success. And we analyzed that cohort versus the previous one that was on a self-serve basis. And the latter retention rate skyrocketed, churn plummeted, NPS doubled. And so that's when we were like, okay, there's some magic here. I'm a big believer that a startup at the end of the day is a series of experiments to unlock user psychology. And we did that in the form of this first time user experience. And so it was very contrarian to what you would expect with a piece of consumer or SaaS software. Our investors were like, what are you doing? This doesn't scale. You need to scale this up. And we were like, we know what we're doing here. We have such conviction down this path. And so we made that our go-to-market strategy. This was the first time user experience. You cannot use Superhuman until you're onboarded by someone on the team. And so our head of growth, Gaurav, took over. He did like 400 onboardings. And then we brought in, we basically built out a growth onboarding team. And to this day, we have onboarding specialists who are onboarding about 500-600 customers a week. And it's growing. And so as we continue to scale the team. So because of that, there's been a wait list. And so that wait list has ballooned, and it was 100,000, 200,000. Now there's 400,000 people on the wait list. It's because we just don't have enough people on the team to onboard these 400,000 people. Also, we keep people on the wait list if we think they are not product market fit with the product. So there are folks who have an Android app. We don't have they have an Android. We don't have an Android app yet. They're likely going to churn if they use Superhuman on desktop and Gmail on Android, right? Or there are folks who are on Outlook and not on Gmail and G Suite. They won't be able to use the product. And so we've got this down to a science where, based on these users filling out a pre-onboarding survey, we know with a high degree of accuracy, this person's going to be successful on Superhuman and this person's not. And this person who's not, we got to get the product a bit further along for them before we can actually enable it for them. And so so that's the approach that we've taken with our launch.
Interesting. And do you think you will have an Android launch? Yeah.
We're productizing the experience right now. We might have a alpha later this year in Q4, but I would expect a customer-facing version sometime early next year.
Correct. I think both Clubhouse and Superhuman should be on Android, because I think you can cater to this sort of audience as well. And very interesting. You pointed out that you made up the initial first 40, 50 people who could come on board. But who does the audience actually cater to? Is it a B2B product for corporates, and who's the ideal customer?
Yeah, the ideal customer are professionals who spend hours a day in their inbox. And so we identified right before we started the company that there are about 1 billion professionals globally. And it's not just folks in tech, it's teachers, it's doctors, it's architects. There are about 1 billion professionals globally that spend at least 3 or 4 hours a day in their inbox. And so Superhuman's mission and value prop is rooted in speed. We save folks on average an hour a day using Superhuman versus what they were using before. And in many cases, these individuals are hitting inbox zero for the first time in their lives. So that's the primary set of users and customers that we're going after. When we first started the company, we laser focused on the power user archetype, and that included founders, CEOs, investors, executives, people who are doing a lot of email, whose needs are not currently being met in the market. Salespeople, recruiters, marketers, they have a lot of sales, recruiting, and marketing enablement email tools. Those exist in the marketplace. And so we went after that previous archetype, that previous persona first. And then as we've built the business and as we started to scale, we're expanding into other types of personas, other types of users and customers.
Got it. And a lot of founders, when they launch one product, they're also looking to launch other second product, more number of products. What is your thesis behind how should they approach about launching the next a second or third product?
Yeah, we're smack dab in the middle of that right now. We are in the process of working on Superhuman's Act 2. I can't go into too much detail there, but I will say that whatever metrics that you're tracking that gives you an indication of the performance and success of the business, that cannot slip. If that slips for the first product for the core business, it's time to hit the pause button on what you're working on with the next thing. And so for us, for example, we not only track NPS, we not only track usage and Superhuman. The way that that's manifested is we we have this metric internally called Delightedness, which person's delighted if they send 90% or more emails through Superhuman versus using another mail client like Gmail or anything else in the market. And so we track that. We track the very disappointed metric as well. So we still track our product market fit metric to this day on a weekly basis. And so once those were operating at levels that we were comfortable with, that we were happy with, then we felt we had the resources and bandwidth to go ahead and start to take on a second product. If those were not performing at the levels that we were comfortable with, that we were happy with, then we would not have focused on a second product. Because for us, and really for any founder or any company, they really should focus on making the product experience delightful versus letting one kind of become mediocre and then start to work on a second one. I think it's better business to make sure the first and core product is operating at levels that you're happy with.
Interesting. And Superhuman is one of the most interesting companies. But what should founders do to make their teams bold and ambitious when it comes to product teams, or even for marketing teams? What advice would you give to founders who are looking to build some great teams?
Yeah. So pre-product market fit, there's a lot of control exerted, especially amongst the founders, the founding team, and anyone at the leadership level. Is all that matters is to get to product market fit. Once you start to hit that inflection point, then you go from exerting control and being reactive to letting go of control and start to become more proactive beyond just product. And so for us, that's been a journey around empowering our team and really just setting a North Star of here is where we want to get to. We trust, given the caliber of folks that we've hired and the values alignment, as we're very particular about bringing people on the team who align with our three core values. We trust that they will figure out how to get to that North Star and just empower them and support them and make sure that they have the resources and that we as leaders are investing in their growth in order to help propel the company. And so it's been amazing to see that in the company from, our lead iOS engineer, Amuye. She came on as the first mobile engineer on the team, and she's ascended into head of engineering at Superhuman. Our first growth generalist, before we really realized that we were going to do onboardings as our core strategy, Laurel, she ascended into becoming a onboarding specialist, a senior onboarding specialist now. She's now our first onboarding manager, right? And so really empowering folks to grow and give them the tools to help us as a company get from point A to that North Star.
Correct. And Vivek, what is some of your biggest lessons when it comes to acquiring and retaining talent? You've been part of LiveAmp, Superhuman, and Aseed. What do you think is the biggest challenge, and what has been your lesson in retaining talent?
Yeah, in terms of acquiring talent and retaining talent, I would say the biggest lesson is really around you as a business, as a company, as a leadership team, as founders. First, identify where your core values are. for us as a company, when we started Superhuman back in May of 2015, we came up with these 6 values. It was be brilliant, be swift, do good, create delight, and be resourceful. And I think there's 1 or 2 more. And a few years in, we had this self-reflection where we're like, you know what, some of those values they're not really indicative of who we are. So like break the rules was one of our values. And I think we took that because of Facebook's, move fast and break things. And we're like, that's not indicative of who we are. We're not a type of company who just breaks the rules. We're very intentional about what we do. And so we read this book called The Advantage by Robert Lencioni, and there was a chapter specifically on core values. And as a leadership group, we spent every Thursday morning from 9:30 to 10:30 a.m. at a cafe in San Francisco. And for about 3 months, we talked about what are our values, and we casted a pretty wide net, and we took a very iterative approach. And then we started to identify what our core values are, and then started wordsmithing it. And those three core values are create delight, do things of remarkable quality, and be intentional. And so that permeates into all aspects of the organization, from how we treat each other, how we treat customers, and especially how we acquire and retain talent. And so I think this is something that I wish we had done much earlier, like when we started the company, right? I think that would have helped prevent against mishires that we made. We made a couple mishires in our first year. That would have helped prevent against that. And that would have given us the laser focus to identify, here are the people in the market who not only pass our technical bar, our interview bar, but also adhere to these values as well. Because that's a very important thing as a company scales, is to not lose their culture. Culture is a shared way of doing something with passion. I steal that from Brian Chesky from Airbnb. And we look at the values, the core values, as the boundary conditions of the culture. And so it's important to continue to bring on talent that align with these core values that you've set out.
Got it. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think aligning values to employees is very important, and keeping the culture of the company is important. And Vivek, I want to talk about what's your thesis behind seed investing, and are you stage and sector and geography agnostic, especially when it comes to now into working remotely?
Excuse me. Yeah, so I've been fortunate enough last year to spend more time, usually late nights, a few hours a week, and mostly on the weekends on angel investing. And so I started out making a handful of personal investments. I've since have put together a small fund. So I'm a fund manager in that sense. And so making about 15, 20 investments over the course of this year. It's about a $1 million fund. And my thesis, I first start with the market that the company is, that the startup is looking to attack. And it needs to be binarily big, and it needs to be growing. So that needs to be a check. And then I look at the founders. Are the founders very opinionated about product? That's super important to me. Does the founder CEO have a technical background? As someone who is a founder CEO who didn't have a technical background, I realized my limitations, especially with product, especially with hiring engineers. And so if the company is building a software tech company, to me, it's important that the founder CEO also has a tech background. And so Rahul, for example, Superhuman, was a PhD in computer science before he dropped out of University of Cambridge. And so so the team itself should also have some founder market fit, and they should have some unique insight in the world that other people don't know. And that's usually a function of being in that particular space prior to starting the company, and identifying pain points or problems in the market that may not be obvious to other people. And then from a stage standpoint, I look at everything from idea stage all the way to Series A. And I love getting in as early as possible. So my sweet spot is around pre-seed and seed. And then from a focus standpoint, I primarily focus on B2B SaaS. I look at productivity, messaging, collaboration. And I do also invest in B2C. B2C, mostly consumer, mostly mobile, and some social as well.
Got it. Interesting. And I quickly want to do the top three. What's your favorite business book?
So I mentioned The Advantage by Robert Lencioni. That's one that I've shared the most to other founders. The one that's had probably the most impact on my life was The 48 Laws of Power. That one I wish I'd read much earlier in my life. It has given me a sense of how other people operate and kind of fine-tuned against that. So yeah, so those are probably the ones that definitely come to mind.
We'll put that in the show notes. If you could go back in time when you started working in startups, be it LiveAmp or Superhuman, what is the one thing you would have focused on or done anything differently?
So I would have definitely have spent time investing in learning software engineering, and just, if I was in college and even pre-college, I would have taken computer science classes and spent time on that. I think with that set of skills, one can become a force multiplier and be able to hack and build on their own. And that is unfortunately a limitation I have. It's not to say I can't do it today. I definitely, when I started Airseed, I spent a couple of weeks immersing myself in Ruby on Rails, and I taught myself, enough to build a crawler to crawl data from LinkedIn, and kind of do some really fun stuff there. But that's something I definitely would have done differently. And then from an investing standpoint, I wish I had invested much earlier in my career.
And do you have any favorite online tools, for example, Gmail, Slack, Zoom, Superhuman?
Not a fan of Slack. I very much detest Slack. Obviously Superhuman for email. Outside of email, I would say from a data management standpoint, I use Airtable a lot. I also like Zapier. Zapier is really cool too.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. Vivek, what is the best way people can reach out to you and know more about you?
Yeah, so I can be reached over email, vivek@superhuman.com. I'm also on Twitter @VSodera. So feel free to either email or DM me.
Got it. We'll put that in the show notes. Vivek, thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks, Rohit. Really appreciate it.